Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. In this video, we're going to talk about optical parallax on variable magnification optics. Low power variable magnification optics are all the rage right now, and for good reason. They provide some significant advantages over your traditional RDS, but they do come with their own degree of issues that you don't necessarily have to deal with on an RDS. And the biggest one is going to be optical eye relief. There is a certain distance at which the eye has to be placed from the exit or the pupil or the ocular objective of the optic, which is something you're not going to see on a traditional RDS, the great majority of them that are out there, because they have infinite eye relief. Whereas because of the inherent design and the nature of a magnified optic, you have to have a certain degree of eye relief based on the way that the optic works. Basically, we want our eye to be in line as closely as possible with the optical axis of the optic. But parallax is something that is going to exist in all optics, and for the most part, it's something that you can easily contend with if you understand what you're looking at and what the scope is telling you. Unlike an RDS, a magnified optic is not going to be parallax free. There's going to be a degree of parallax. In fact, many of your longer range or your higher magnification optics have a parallax adjustment, which allows you to adjust the reticle's focal position in relation to the distance you're looking at. This particular optic, this is the Nightforce NX8, and a lot of optics in its category, that lower magnification category, generally have their parallax adjustment fixed at a certain distance. This particular optic's fixed at 125 meters, which is actually very generous. That means that inside of that distance and outside of that distance, to a certain degree, your optical axis is going to be slightly different than the axis of your target, to a degree that you wouldn't necessarily notice, realistically speaking, unless your eye and the optic itself are out of alignment. Eye relief. Eye relief is something that's preached very heavily. As these optics become more popular, people start to use them in ways that they haven't, at least from a widespread point of view, been used in the past. People are more and more relying on these for a CQB or a close distance purpose, and that's fine. As long as proper training, practice, and understanding of eye relief goes into that. But it does present some inherent problems, like I've already said, that you're not going to have with an RDS. The whole purpose of this video is to show you if your eye relief is not ideal, is it going to create a significant disadvantage or significant issue with your point of aim, point of impact on your target. Of course, the reason I bring this up is not because I'm going to preach that as long as you can get your reticle out there, it's going to be good enough, but to show you what you're going to give up versus what you're going to gain. Time being of the essence, time being one of the common metrics we use to measure firearms proficiency, the others being distance and accuracy. In a situation where I can't get perfect eye alignment with my optic, is that going to create a significant enough accuracy issue that is something I need to be concerned with? And should I train for it? Should I practice for it? Well, the answer is yes. You should definitely practice and train for improper eye relief if you're going to use one of these optics, because depending on the situation, depending on the time restriction you're under, you may have to accept a quote-unquote good enough sight picture. That being said, you should always make an effort to refine your eye relief and your eye placement behind your optic body before you break your shot. Now, incorrect eye relief can occur in one of three common ways. Your eye is either going to be too close to the optic, it's going to be too far away from the optic, you're going to have too much eye relief or outside of your eye relief, or you're going to have a misalignment, a parallax issue of eye placement in relation to the optic window itself, which is generally referred to as optical parallax in relation to the optical axis of the optic. I don't think I could fit the word optic into that paragraph anymore if I tried and have it be correct. If your eye relief is too short, but your head placement is ideal, you're going to get a ring shadow around your reticle, but you're still going to be able to see the edges of the reticle in almost every optic out there, especially in a low variable magnification optic where you're set on one power to check it, but you should also check it at your maximum setting to see just how bad it can affect your ability to use your reticle. Now, if your eye relief is too long, you're not going to be able to see the edges of your reticle. As soon as you can notice, like, hey, I can only see, just the center objective and maybe, 3 or 4 stadia to either side, that should let you know immediately that you're too far out of your eye box, so to speak. And the final parallax issue, common parallax issue you can have in relation to eye relief, is your eye is not perfectly in line with the rear of the reticle, causing shadows to present in one of your 4 compass directions or a variation thereof, such as to the right, to the left, to the top, to the bottom. That's going to cause point of aim, point of impact differences as well. So in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at those types of parallax and how they can affect our point of aim, point of impact at various reasonable distances. I'm going to do 5 meters, 10 meters, 25 meters, 50 meters, and 100 meters. For those of you that are curious, just to give you the stats, I already said I'm going to be using the Nightforce NX8, which is a 1:8. I'll be mounted on my Landtech Raven 1 and 7 223 Wild chamber. I'll be shooting a 62 grain FMJ, which is what this rifle is particularly zeroed for at this time. Now, zero distance on this rifle is 100 meters. So that will also, your zero distance is also going to play into any particular eye relief or parallax issues that you have. Just to simplify things for the video process, I'll be doing just a general holdover at distances inside of my zero distance, but I'm not going to actually dial in specifics because that kind of plays to the purpose of the video, which is, am I going to have time to dial down if I have a 100 meter zero, if I have to take a 5 meter shot? No, you're not. So you're going to have to hold over, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing at those distances until we get out to the zero distance, which is 100 meters. For our accuracy standards, what we're going to be looking at is the human form. I'm a self-defense focused instructor, so I stay self-defense focused when it comes to accuracy. Looking for practical accuracy, and that being placement in the high thoracic cavity. I'm going to choose the chest as my point of aim, so on so-called center mass. I want to put all my rounds in that critical organs package: heart, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins, superior inferior via cava, the aorta, so on, and of course the lungs, so on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff in there that doesn't react well to gunfire for practical purpose. Now, if I was going to go for precision accuracy, I would probably have time, relatively speaking, to refine my eye relationship with the optic body and eliminate any of those shadows or the eye relief issues that I'm talking about in this video. So we're not really necessarily going to talk about the precision accuracy. Precision accuracy I consider specifically targeting a specific organ or a part of that organ. Getting really into the fine point of aim, point of impact exactly within, 1 MOA or something like that. So this is where I want to keep all my rounds at all the distances I'm going to shoot. So just using reticle holdover, that was the groups from 5. You saw ideal placement, short eye relief, I'm getting too close into the optic. Long eye relief, I'm too far outside of the optic. And then that optical shadowing in the lens, the left, right, top, bottom. Now, when it comes to the horizontal discrepancies, it's actually much easier to get too far into the rifle than it is to get too far out of it when it comes to that scope shadowing. But just looking at our shot placement, you can see that the rounds tend to go opposite of the direction that the reticle or the shadow presents. So if the shadow's on the left, the rounds are going to go generally right, so on and so forth. But generally speaking, that's a very good group, despite the fact that we did not have that perfect eye relief except for that first 3-round group. Every group, 3-round group, we get a pretty good footprint of what's going on. Now again, that was at 5 meters, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a metric to work off of. At 5 meters, do I have to have my reticle perfectly 100% centered in order to get a hit? With a high quality optic, the answer is not no. It's just straight up no. I don't have to have it. I want it and I need it, but if time doesn't give me the ability to refine my eye placement, if I'm having an eye relief or a cheek weld issue, I can still break the shot as long as my reticle and my holdover is accounted for, and I'm going to get the hit that I want. So that's our 10 meter group. Again, I'm not seeing significant issues yet. But again, we're still at really close distances. 10 meters is really close, especially considering rifle possibilities. The ability for a rifle to reach out further, that variable magnification optic. Now, as we go out to 25, I'm probably still going to keep it on 1 power, because 25 is a pretty reasonable distance, without having to worry about cranking up the magnification. Factoring in 25 meters, I might not have time to crank up the magnification depending on situation. Now, once I get out to 50 and 100, I'm definitely going to increase my magnification so I have greater chance of PID, greater chance of accuracy. Now, as I do that, and we'll talk about this again, my possibility based on eye relief to have these issues is much more possible. It's much more likely for me to have these issues as the exit pupil closes as I zoom in on my reticle. So that was our 25 meter distance. As you can see from the very first group I fired, my ideal hold group, my ideal eye relief group, my ideal parallax group, my hold was just a little bit too high on that 1x magnification, but I kept that same hold consistently so the round placement wouldn't change in relation to trying to correct for holdover for every 3-round group. Again, we're a little bit high, but we're still keeping things really, really, really tight. And that's a good thing. Even when I'm going, I'd say this round was probably the most extreme. You saw that one hit. That's a little bit of an aberration from the placement. I went really, really deep into the shadow on that one. And that's something that we can definitely account for. But our initial standard was what? Keeping it within that realistic, practical accuracy zone. All things considered, even if that round had been there, those other 2 rounds went roughly right where I wanted them to. So we're still not panicking yet. But let's see what happens when we get out to 50 and then 100. Now this is the first distance where I've actually increased magnification. I went to 8 power on that Night Force NX8 1:8. I'm still very pleased, despite the eye relief and the eye alignment to the optical access issues, with my actual round placement. This is at 50 meters. 50 meters, objectively speaking, would probably give you relatively more time to refine your eye placement, your eye relief behind your optic before you had to make your shot. But if you had to make it fast, you could still get a pretty reasonable hit. One of the caveats to this that I have to bring up, especially when I talk to people in classes, is not all optics are created equally. If it's a budget optic, it might not provide you the same degree of performance that you're going to get from a higher end optic based on tolerances, precision in the optical construction, as well as the reticle construction, and how generous your eye relief and your optical axis can be. When we doubled the distance back here to 100 meters, as you can see, it opened up and told me I should probably clean that rifle. But all things considered, we talk about all the different distances we shot from, use the same point of aim on every target I put up. We've got a really consistent heat map here, which shows what our placement is going to be, even with the divergence, difference of point of aim, point impact that's created by those optical alignment issues, scope shadow issues, if you will, eye relief issues as well. There's a number of different ways that you can get into the scope incorrectly, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be able to get the hit you want, depending on what your degree or your margin for error is. High thoracic cavity on a man-sized target out to 100 meters, I can have really extreme parallax or optical alignment issues and still be able to get the hit that I want. That does not mean I should accept that. I should always be striving for proper eye relief. One of the things that is beneficial about a magnified optic that you don't necessarily get from a red dot sight is the eye relief is specific to a certain distance. There's a measurement, there's an equation there. Whereas with an RDS, I have unlimited eye relief, which means I can get really extreme and really lazy with my dot placement in the window in relation to the target, in relation to the rifle's alignment to the target. With the variable magnification optics, if I get too far outside of my window, I lose my reticle, which means I have to make those corrections, and it forces you to become a more consistent shooter when it comes to cheek weld, head placement, eye placement, and relief to the optic itself, your optical window. So there are some distinct advantages in training on your low variable magnification optic. And then going back to an RDS, it kind of instills a greater degree of discipline, if you will, in your RDS use, your eye placement in relation to the optic itself. So there you have it. We kind of already talked about it, but it's definitely worth mentioning again. Not all optics are created equal. Some optics are going to perform better at this, some are going to perform worse. My advice to you is verify before you trust. Take your rifle, your optic, your mount height, take it out to the range and see what introducing eye relief issues or parallax scope alignment, optical axis alignment issues into your sight picture are going to cause for you. Again, this was my shooting on my rifle with my ammunition, my skill set. So your performances may be slightly different based on all those uncontrollable factors that are going to be different. And again, there were no additional metrics that we had to factor into this, such as I didn't have a time constraint. I was shooting at my leisure in a very administrative way. The distances were set, the accuracy standard was set in that high thoracic cavity. But I wanted to put this out because it does come up from time to time. People attribute not being able to get their hit on maybe an optical alignment issue or an axis issue, parallax issue, if you will. And I want to demonstrate that depending on what your desired point of impact is, that may not necessarily be the case. Some of your other fundamentals may have been less efficient, and they could have attributed or been the direct cause or the leading cause of your inability to hit what you wanted to hit. But I think everybody can agree from a practical standpoint, I'm able to deliver rounds within 6 to 8 inches, 8.5 by 11 is the size of that B zone, of where I want them to be, which especially out to 100 meters is actually pretty good depending on the metrics that we're looking at. Obviously we want point of aim, point of impact every single time, but life isn't necessarily going to give us that ability, because when we factor in taking this skill set to a self-defense situation, regardless of occupation, your bad guy always gets to decide what your final sight picture looks like, and that's something we have to factor in. Now, a note on mounts. The 193, 195 height mounts for variable magnification optics are super hot right now, and that's great. Try before you buy. That optic height, that mount height may put your optic outside of what your physiology wants to shoot with, because not all necks are created equal, not all eyes in relation to jawline depth or height is created equal. So just like stock selection, length of pull, all these other factors, there is no one true height that's going to get you what you want. It's a great option for people who need it, but it isn't necessarily for everyone. So check it out. Just like the 1.5 or the 1.75 aren't necessarily for everyone. So it's just something you definitely want to check out. If you are new to low power variable magnification optics and you're trying to decide if you want that to be your go-to optic for your go-to rifle, hopefully this video is able to give you not necessarily data for you, because like I said, again, you should go out and shoot this yourself, but a framework to kind of reference. I've done this video in the past specifically on red dot sights, and just like I mentioned earlier, the variable mags, they don't let you get as much parallax introduced before you lose your reticle completely. If I go too far right, too far left, too far high, too far back, so forth, I'm going to lose the reticle completely, and I won't be able to shoot using the reticle for point of aim. So the red dots let you be a little lazier. That doesn't necessarily mean that for you, the low power variable magnification optic is going to be the way to go. I do highly recommend them, especially for law enforcement and those people who live in rural areas, because it gives you that extended distance, especially proper PID on your threat as distances increase. Doesn't mean you can't have one in an urban area, obviously, but it is more beneficial for certain occupations and certain distances or certain areas or environments, if you will. So I wanted to put this out to give you guys kind of an idea of the sky is not in fact falling if parallax and scope shadow and eye relief issues exist, but it does give you a metric when you shoot it yourself to kind of factor in, okay, if I snap at 5 meters and I've got a consistent shadow to the right, I know from personal experience, purposely practicing to see what this is like on my point of aim, point of impact in administrative fashion, that I can go ahead and take the shot and get pretty much exactly the hit that I want, close enough that no one's really going to be able to tell a difference. Now when you get back to 25, same deal. Maybe you need to refine it. 50, 100. Maybe, okay, I've seen this before, I've trained for this, I've practiced for this before. That's too much shadow. I need to fix my eye relief before I break this shot. I'm Eric Allen with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.